Welcome to Deep Thought. Thoughts about polar opposites. Yeah, and you know I like to think on this channel, just like to ponder things. You know, I be pondering whatever. I could be, I don't know. I could be just sitting out in the locker room at a gym and I'm pondering something deep. In fact, I remember a dear friend from college. This is back when I was a freshman in college. Say, you know, Rom, you're very philosophical. All right. But I was thinking about polar opposites because I was thinking about superheroes. If you think about, think about some popular superheroes. You had Superman and Lex Luthor. You know? Now, they represented opposites. In fact, I remember there was a Superman novel I read decades ago. And the writer had someone mention that Lex Luthor probably wouldn't be who he is if Superman never existed, if he never showed up. He would probably do something different. But because you had this superhuman, this godlike being, it automatically created someone like Lex Luthor. Someone like Lex Luthor. I want y'all to think about that. And there was I can't think of the title of this movie, but it had Bruce Willis. Invincible. In that movie, it was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I think Shyamalan, something like that, right? And Bruce Willis was playing this guy who was indestructible. But his polar opposite was Samuel L. Jackson playing somebody whose bones would break at the slightest thing. Called himself Mr. Glass. And, you know, they were all in that enemy thing. And, you know, and Mr. Glass, you know, he saw, you know, who Bruce Willis was. So it was that back and forth. But you had one side, you had the other. You know, Batman and Joker. Batman, if you really think about it, represents order. But what does Joker represent? Chaos. In fact, in the Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker, he even said that, I'm chaos. He would just do stuff just out of pure chaos. See, there's always that opposite thing. But then that gets into a deeper reality, the principle of duality. For every one thing, there's something opposite. There's some opposite. That's how the universe brings balance. Once you think about that, like, no matter how good, if you have some individuals who are good. I mean, they work to make a difference, to make the world a better place, like just great individuals. But then you have some other individuals who just are the polar opposite. They just bring darkness, it's destruction. You know, a term I've used before, demon lovers. Their whole thing is just chaos. You have some people on some chaos, but then the opposite of the people who are doing well. And, you know, but then again, that is about the whole duality, because you have both. You have, well, good and evil is relative. It depends on your perspective, but you do have night and day. But you can't appreciate day without having night. And they go back and forth. But it's the thing, it's all about balance. You know, shoot, in Star Wars, they talk about, you know, the Jedi versus the Sith. But at the end of the day, there were like people speculating about what the last, you know, what the Rise of Skywalker would be back about. And they were talking about the gray Jedi who had the traits of both, because it represents balance. You know, I've talked about the whole thing on my relationship channel about intelligentsians and bohemians. You know, the intelligentsians, they are sexually repressed to some extent. But then you have the bohemian, their sexuality is loose. So you have the nun versus the sex worker. But we all have that in us. But the only way to really deal with that is to bring balance. And that's what it's all about. Indeed, when you look at the history of civilizations, you have some civilizations that rise, but then they fall. but then another one rises. It's always a balance. It's always that thing. So I was really thinking about that. I was like, I'm gonna tell you another way I thought about this. My sister, well, we thought she was mentally retarded, and rest her soul. We thought she was mentally retarded, but looking at it now, she was simply on the autism spectrum. But it was a different place back then. We didn't have the knowledge we do now of the autism spectrum. I mean, actually, in her later years, I did have her IQ tested, and the psychologist said it was higher than his in some areas, not all areas, of course, but some areas. So, but I was thinking about that. I remember thinking about her, and I said, well, if somebody is on that end, then somebody can be on the total opposite end. And that's like with everything. If you have one thing, somewhere in the world is another. You could even have a polar opposite. We got all the traits that you have. There's someone whose traits they ain't complementary, but they're connected, but maybe on the dark side. Or if you're on the dark side, and when I say dark side, maybe more in terms of how you use your gifts, maybe in a more selfish manner versus someone else who uses it more for the people. But you still need that balance. Indeed, getting back to that intelligence and bohemian thing, we need that balance in ourselves. Because someone who gives just totally to everyone, they don't leave much for themselves. They can be worn out. Many healers, many giving people, so many people taken from them, it's not good. But then you have some other people that are totally selfish. But what if you bring them together? You bring them together, you have that balance where somebody, yes, they're very giving to people, but they also know when to set up that boundary and say, oh no, I'm doing this for myself now. I want y'all to think about that. And you have it a lot. Indeed, if you look at a lot of stories, a lot of incidents, it's always about that. Like, especially in stories, like the superhero, supervillain story. If you look at it, the great hero, there's always a perfectly balanced villain they just have different things. In fact, sometimes they could switch places, and it's deep. It is deep, but it's necessary, because getting back to that thing about good and evil, the example I've used several times on this very channel, a fox in a hen house. Well, for the hen, that fox being in the hen house is evil. But for the fox, it's good. Like I said, it's all relative. Something to think about. And these are just thoughts. Y'all know how I do on here. It ain't like a right answer. Oh, this should. You get should out. It's just something to think about, something to ponder. All right? So, anyway, that's all I have for now. I'll get back with y'all later. Peace and blessings.